Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Want to go ahead and get to some news from Monday. A little bit of a quieter time in the college sports space. You know, Monday's always a slow day in college football. Right now, everybody's arguing over playoff resumes. My team's resume is great. Your team stinks. Put my team in the playoff. Blah, 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 blah. Basketball, I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower week. We do have Duke, Arizona on Friday. Next week, we got Feast Week. We got Atlantis. We got Maui. We'll preview all of that later on in the week. But right now, I do want to focus on a recruiting update, several recruiting updates, some very interesting updates involving one of the top high school players in America, Caleb Wilson. Cut his list on Monday, and I will say, do think it is really trending in the direction of one school and one school specifically. So let's go ahead and dive into who Caleb Wilson is, what those schools are, and where I ultimately think he ends up, and frankly, the time frame in which I think it happens. So Caleb Wilson, I've said several times, and we've done these recruiting updates throughout the fall. He's frankly one of my favorite players in the class of 2025. And the one thing I respect about him, first of all, 6'8", 6'9", forward in Atlanta. But what I respect about him is can play a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes you get these five-star players, need to have the ball in their hands, need to score 25 points a game. If they don't score 25 points a game, they don't, whatever. I bring it up because Caleb Wilson's kind of that hybrid that can do a little bit of everything. As I said, 6'8", athletic, defends his butt off. He's a great rebounder and has the ability to kind of take over games offensively, but I wouldn't necessarily say that is what his strength is. As a matter of fact, I thought he played some of his best basketball of his, young career. I don't know if you can even call it a career at this point, but over this summer, remember, he played with Cam and Caden Boozer, the Boozer twins who are headed to Duke. And Cam Boozer's the number 2 player in America, 5-star, no doubt about it, can't miss kid. And I loved how Caleb Wilson played alongside him. And we talked about this all fall when Caleb Wilson was taking all of his visits. But what I loved about it was the idea that when you looked at Caleb Wilson, there were days where he could put up 20 and 10, get you, be the star of the game. But then again, playing with Cam Boozer, there were games where he might get you 6 and 12 and again, wasn't defined strictly by how many times he puts the ball in the basket like so many young players are. So that is not only a talented player, but a self-aware player, a guy, as I said, he can get you 20. So I'm not saying he can't get you 20. I'm just saying he isn't defined by that. And so I've enjoyed watching him play. I've enjoyed watching him evolve as a player. And now let's get to the recruiting update because there was actually several very interesting ones over the course of the last couple days. The big news, it did come on Monday morning via Joe Tipton, does such a great job with On 3. And that news was that Caleb Wilson, 5-star forward from Atlanta, has cut his list down to 5 schools. He is down to, as you can see on the screen here, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio State, North Carolina, and UCF. And what I think is interesting about that update is not so much even necessarily who is on that list. Again, Carolina, Kentucky, Ohio State, Central Florida, and Tennessee, but who isn't on that list, okay? If you have followed this recruitment closely, I think there were a lot of times, especially over the course of the summer, where I think you could have argued that Arkansas was maybe the perceived favorite in this recruitment. I think we did the Where Will the 5 Stars Commit video, and back in July, I think I had Caleb Wilson trending towards Arkansas at the time. But listen, this is a kid who's had a relationship with John Calipari for 2.5, 3 years, dating back to when Calipari was at the previous school. He leaves, and I think there were a lot of people, and I'll include myself, guilty as charged, that really felt like, you know what? There is a possibility that of all the 2025 kids, that he will be a priority at Arkansas, that he may end up at Arkansas alongside Cal based on that relationship that was built when Cal was in Lexington. Well, it doesn't happen. We're down to 5, and I got to be transparent. If there is one school that I feel like is really starting to trend in the right direction for this kid and really has kind of been trending that way for probably about 6 to 8 weeks now, it's our guy Mark Pope. And it's the Kentucky Wildcats, okay? So a couple things stand out on this recruitment. The first thing, and we talked about this a lot probably 5-6 weeks ago. But that recruiting class that Mark Pope already has committed and already has signed, they're like this. They're tight knit. And the one great thing about getting recruits committed and signed early is that they then become your best recruiters. Okay. And I remember back, this was probably mid September, late September, something like that. But Kentucky already had Malachi Moreno committed. They already had Jasper Johnson committed. And I solely bring it up to say that I remember that when a Caden Lewis, who was not committed at the time, he has since committed. So I don't want Kentucky. Oh, Charles, Caden Lewis is committed. I know he's committed. I know he's signed. But at the time he was uncommitted. And I remember Jasper Johnson and Malachi Moreno jumping into the comments on his tweets, jumping into the comments on his Instagram posts, really letting a Caden Lewis know that he was a priority, and also letting Caleb Wilson know that he was a priority as well. So this class is tight. The 3-man class that Kentucky already has is recruiting on behalf of Kentucky. And I thought it was interesting. Jasper Johnson last week did a media availability at OTE down in Atlanta. So Atlanta, of course, is where Jasper Johnson plays his high school basketball, Overtime Elite. And before the Kentucky game against Duke at State Farm Arena, Overtime had a kind of media availability for Jasper Johnson. Well, if you follow the YouTube channel, you saw our video. I sent producer Matt. He met with fans. He interviewed fans. He did a great job. You can find it right on the YouTube channel. But producer Matt was also at Jasper Johnson's media availability. And I believe it was my buddy Jack Pilgrim who actually, if you listen to the question, asked Jasper Johnson about recruiting Caleb Wilson. Here is what Jasper had to say about the possibility of playing with Caleb Wilson.
Yeah, pushing for him hard. I know he's a dominant force down, at the 4 position. Can score the ball, block shots, rebound, can do it all. So, really just trying to push him. I know that'll make it a lot easier, us, offensively as well, because can't really strategize on anybody with him on our team as well.
So there you have it. He's a dominant force down low, blocking shots. You could tell. Jasper Johnson, by the way, in another part of the interview, said that he tried to actually play AAU ball with Caleb Wilson this summer. It didn't quite work out, but you can see just in that short 20 or so second clip that, and by the way, credit to Jack for asking a great question. You can see the excitement and enthusiasm that Jasper Johnson would have for playing with Caleb Wilson. I think there are a couple of other factors as well working in Kentucky's favor. First of all, it's worth noting Caleb Wilson himself, after while Kentucky was in Atlanta, guess who was at the Duke game? It was Caleb Wilson. So he got to see the team in person. He obviously has a tight relationship with the other players that are in that recruiting class. And the one thing I'll say, I think all of these kids, they're all getting smarter about not only like, who is the school and who's coaching us and NIL and this and that, but it's also style of play, right? And the one thing that I think a lot of players with Mark Pope, with some of these new coaches, Mark Pope at Kentucky, Kevin Young at BYU, that's one thing AJ DeBonsa has said about Kevin Young and BYU. He just wants to see, hey, are you actually going to play the way that you say you're going to play? Because my career is going to be in your hands if I commit to you. And so I bring it up because if you're Kentucky and Caleb Wilson got to see that game in person, he can see the role that he could potentially have and the impact that he could have in that Kentucky offense. By the way, who would you argue was probably the best player for Kentucky on Tuesday night last week against Duke? It's probably Andrew Carr. What is Andrew Carr? A stretch 4 that kind of does a little bit of everything. What is Caleb Wilson? A stretch 4 that kind of does a little bit of everything. So I think when you add up all these factors, you have to feel like Kentucky is in a very good place. Now, I think it's worth noting, I don't think this recruitment is done, although we will get to the timeline in a minute. And it's not like these other schools aren't going to go down without a fight. Listen, North Carolina fans are mad at me because it feels like every time I talk about a recruit, it's something negative. But I would say, and by the way, when I say it's something negative, it's because they've missed out on a lot of their targets this fall, whether it's Braylon Mullins, who's at UConn, Jasper Johnson, who's going to Kentucky, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, North Carolina, I was going to say Kentucky again, but North Carolina has put on the full court press. I do think if there's another school that could potentially get in the mix, or potentially, I should say, probably is in the mix, I do think it is probably North Carolina. So I don't think that recruitment is over necessarily yet. North Carolina is going to do what they can. To North Carolina's credit, they look pretty good early in the season. Easily could have won that game at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. And then I would also factor in, I think some of those other schools could be in the mix as well. Ohio State just got a visit a few weeks ago. I don't think you're taking a visit in late October, early November if you are not seriously considering that school. Tennessee will see, Central Florida will see. But to me, I think you got to feel good if you're a Kentucky fan. But I think what you really have to watch out for at this point is pretty straightforward. What is the actual timeline on the commitment? You know, Caleb Wilson has said he wants to get this commitment done sooner rather than later. He actually put out a tweet. That's the Joe Tipton tweet. Excuse me here. Where is the Caleb Wilson tweet? Here it is. Caleb Wilson, you can see on the screen, soon with an arrow emoji. Well, listen, I'm not an emoji expert, although I do use them a lot, but that's another conversation for another day. But I don't think this kid is putting out the soon tweet with the emoji if he is not going to commit soon. And to me, I think all of that favors Kentucky. The one thing I would say is if you're not a Kentucky fan watching this video, best thing you can hope for is that commitment gets pushed back. Maybe North Carolina can make a run. Maybe North Carolina has a good season. Maybe Ohio State looks better under Diebler than we were expecting them, of course, coming off that big win against Texas on opening night. So again, not saying anything is done, but it feels like it's getting certainly close. And if I had to make a pick right now, I would say Caleb Wilson eventually ends up a Kentucky Wildcat. And I would say this, if they get him, that is a heck of a first class for Mark Pope. Tough couple days for the Pope won't be able to recruit group in the media space, because there have been some people who have said that. I never bought it. We've talked about that time and time again, but we will see if Caleb Wilson officially does commit to Kentucky in the coming weeks. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips and videos going up every single day. A lot of college football, a lot of college basketball. We're closing in on 47,000 subscribers. So I appreciate everything that you all have done for this page. Make sure you're subscribed, and we will be back. Full episode, Aaron Torres Pod,